The knock at midnight tit was a cold and quiet night on planet Virel. The wind howled outside, and the stars above blinked like eyes watching from the sky. Inside a small metal cabin, a human man named John sat alone, drinking something warm. He was used to silence. He liked it. John was a war veteran. He had seen too much. He left Earth to live far away on this lonely planet where no one knew his past. No one came to visit. No one knocked on his door, but tonight, someone did. Knock, knock, knock. Knock. John froze. Oh, he slowly put down his cup. His hand moved to the old plasma rifle leaning by the wall. No one should be out in this weather. And no one ever knocked another knock. Knock, knock. He walked to the door, heart steady but alert. He opened it slowly. There, in the cold wind and rain, stood a tall alien woman. Her skin was pale blue, and her dark hair clung to her wet face. She was shaking, but her eyes were strong. Behind her stood two small alien children, hiding behind. Her legs, they looked scared, tired, and hungry. The woman looked into John's eyes and spoke. "Please, ... let us in. Just for the night." John said nothing. He looked at the children. One held a broken toy. The other had a cut on his forehead. The woman held no weapon. She had no bag, no food, only fear in her voice and desperation in her eyes. John stepped aside. "Come in." They entered quickly. The warmth of the cabin made the children sigh with relief. The woman bowed her head. "Thank you." John handed them towels and something warm to drink. He watched them, silent. He didn't trust easy. Not after what he'd seen in the war. But something about her. Something wasn't right. He finally spoke. "Who are you?" The woman looked up. "My name is Sarah. These are my children. We ... We have nowhere else to go." John narrowed his eyes. "Why here? Why me?" Sarah hesitated. Then she whispered. "They said you were different, that you helped one of us before, that you didn't see us as monsters." John stayed quiet. He didn't answer that. Long ago, he had saved a wounded alien during the war. No one knew about it, or so he thought. Sarah continued, voice low. "My husband is dead. The elders want me to remarry to someone cruel, someone who wants my children gone. I said no. Now they hunt us." John stood still. His grip on the cup tightened. "So, you ran?" Sarah nodded. "I ran. For my children. For their future." One of the children suddenly spoke. "Are you the man who talks to stars?" John blinked. He nodded slowly. "Sometimes." The child smiled weakly. "My daddy used to do that." He said the stars don't judge. A silence filled the room. Heavy, deep. Sarah looked down. "We will leave in the morning. I didn't come to cause trouble." John didn't reply. He looked at the fire, then at Sarah and her children huddled together on the floor. Something stirred. Inside him an old feeling he had buried long ago. He remembered a time during the war. A family he couldn't save. A promise he broke. Guilt burned quietly in his chest. He turned to Sarah. "You can stay. For now." Sarah looked up, her eyes wide. She wanted to say thank you, but he waved his hand. He didn't want words. Not yet. He stood, walking to the door and locking it tight. Then he placed his plasma rifle close to his chair and sat down again. Outside, the wind howled louder. Inside, something had changed. A message flashed on John's old war tablet. It was a warning. "She is marked. Do not help her. Stay out." John stared at the screen, then he turned it off. The widow's story. John didn't sleep. He sat in his chair, eyes on the door, plasma rifle by his side. The fire was low now, casting long shadows across the cabin walls. Sarah and her children lay on a blanket on the floor. The kids had fallen asleep, curled against each other, but Sarah stayed awake. She stared at the ceiling, her hands gripping the edge of the blanket like it might vanish if she let go. The silence between them stretched. Then she spoke. "You're wondering why I really came here?" John didn't answer, but his eyes flicked toward her. Sarah sat up slowly. Her voice was soft, as if she was scared to wake the past. "I was married to a miner. He worked the deep pits under the east mountains. One day, the mines collapsed. They said it was an accident, but I knew the truth." She paused. Her breath trembled. "He found something powerful, something the clan leaders didn't want shared. The next day, he was dead." John stared at her, still silent. Sarah looked into the fire. "They said he died a hero. Gave me a coin and told me to move on. But the worst part was how they looked at my children, as if they were mistakes." Her voice cracked. "You see, my husband wasn't like them. He was from a forbidden line. Had human blood in him that made our children ... unclean." John's jaw tightened. He had seen this before, not on this planet, but on others. Fear of what was different. Hatred passed down like a family name, Sarah continued. "They told me to give the children to the fire priests, cleanse them, Aloma, so they tried to take them. I ran." She looked up now, her eyes burning. "And when I ran, they whispered one name, the human who lives in the woods. The ghost soldier. They said you were dangerous, cold, that you hated noise and hated people." She smiled faintly, but I didn't care. I thought, maybe a man who left the world behind would understand someone like me. John's face showed nothing, but deep inside, her words stabbed old wounds. He remembered a family long ago, a woman with 2 children. He promised to protect them, and failed. Sarah leaned forward. "I'm not asking you to fight for us. I'm not asking you to risk your life. I just needed one night where I didn't have to watch the door every second." One of the children stirred in his sleep, mumbling softly. Sarah reached over and placed her hand gently on his head. A tear rolled down her cheek, but she wiped it away quickly. "I don't cry in front of them. If they see me break, they'll break too." John finally spoke. His voice was rough from silence. "What do they want now?" Sarah's hands tightened. "They want me to marry one of the war cousins. A cruel man. One who believes only strength matters. He said if I become his, he'll forgive the children and train them to be fighters." John raised an eyebrow. "And if you refuse?" Sarah didn't answer with words. She pointed to the deep scar across her arm. "That was my first warning. The next won't miss my heart." John looked away. His grip tightened around the rifle. Sarah lowered her voice again. "You don't have to do anything. I'll leave at sunrise. I know I brought danger here, but I had to try." She stood, walking slowly to the window. She looked out at the dark woods, the stars above, the wild silence around them. "You know," she said, "my husband used to say the stars listen, that they carry our words across the universe. Every night since he died, I tell the stars the same thing." John looked at her. "What's that?" Sarah turned, her face in shadow. "I tell them I won't give up. That my children will not grow up in fear. That if someone hears me, anyone, they'll come." The silence returned, but this time it wasn't empty. John stood up and walked to a metal box by the wall. He opened it slowly and pulled out a worn jacket, black and patched from the war. Then he opened a second box. Inside was an old ID, Chip's old name, rank, everything he had tried to bury. He looked at it, then closed the lid. He walked to Sarah and handed her a blanket. "You're not leaving in the morning." Sarah blinked, but John shook his head. "If they want you, they'll have to come through me." Sarah stared at him, her lips trembling. For the first time, her eyes held something other than fear. Hope. Hunted by shadows, it was still dark when John opened his eyes. Not because of a dream, not because of the cold, but because something was wrong. His instincts, sharpened by years of war, screamed at him. He moved quietly from his chair, picked up the plasma rifle, and crouched near the door. His eyes scanned the room. Sarah and the children were asleep on the floor, unaware. Then he heard it, scratch, 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 not on the door, on the window. John crept toward it, his heart steady, but alert. He glanced outside through the thin curtain. Nothing. Then a whisper. "Give her to us. Human." John's blood went cold. He knew that voice. Not the person, but the tone. Cold, empty, not human. A voice that belonged to someone who had killed before and would again. He stepped back. Slowly, then came a loud crash, a rock through the back window. The children screamed, and Sarah jumped up, pulling them close. John shouted, "Get down!" and raised his rifle. 3 shadows slipped through the trees outside. They were fast, trained, not Wild Raiders clan enforcers. John fired a warning. Shot into the night. Blue light flashed. Trees lit up. 1 shadow fell. The other 2 ducked low and vanished into the woods. Silence returned, but only for a second. Then came the voice again. This time from just beyond the edge of the light. "You were warned, soldier. She is marked. Her children are cursed. Step aside." John didn't move. He stood in the doorway now, rifle aimed, feet firm. "You want her?" he said, voice low and sharp. "Come take her." No one answered. But he knew they were still there, watching, waiting. Inside the cabin, Sarah held her kids tight. Her hands were shaking. "It's them," she whispered. "They tracked me." John turned to her. "How many?" "3 tonight. More may follow. They always move in pairs or small groups. Never alone." John nodded. "They'll come again. And next time, they'll come faster." Sarah stood up, her voice trembling but strong. "You should let us go. I brought this on you." John shook his head. "You didn't bring this, they did." He looked at the broken window, then at the frightened children. "This is no longer just your fight." The next morning, John walked through the forest, checking traps he'd set the night before. One caught a sensor bomb likely planted by the attackers. He disarmed it carefully and took it back to the cabin. Inside, Sarah was feeding her children. She looked up. "That thing. Is it theirs?" John placed the device on the table. "Yes. Signal tracker. They're hunting, not chasing. They'll keep coming until one of us dies." Sarah swallowed hard. "Then teach me." John blinked. "What?" Sarah stood taller. "Teach me to fight. Teach me like you were taught." John stared at her, quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded once. That day, the training began. In the clearing behind the cabin, John taught her how to hold a weapon. How to move without sound. How to stay alert even when her body screamed for rest. "You're not fighting to kill," he said. "You're fighting to protect." Sarah practiced with a wooden staff, her arms shaking after each strike. But she didn't stop. The children watched from the doorway, eyes wide. At one point, her son asked, "Is Mommy a warrior now?" John didn't smile. But something in his eyes softened. She's becoming one. That night, John repaired the window and added a motion alarm. Then he opened a small metal box, one he hadn't touched in years. Inside was a worn photo. A woman with dark hair, two little girls smiling beside her. John stared at it for a long time. He whispered to the photo, "I couldn't save you, but maybe I can save them." He closed the box and returned to his chair, rifle across his lap. The fire crackled. Outside, the forest was too quiet. He knew the silence meant danger. They would come again, and next time they would not knock. The choice of the warrior, the sky was heavy with gray clouds. Wind blew cold through the trees. But John's cabin burned with heat, not from fire, but from training. Sarah's hands were bruised. Her arms shook. But she kept swinging the staff again and again, hitting the wooden post John had set up in the yard. "Keep your stance wide," John said, stepping behind her. "Balance is your weapon too." Sarah growled through her teeth, sweat rolling down her temples. "I'm trying." John nodded. "Try harder." She struck again, harder this time. The post cracked dot from the cabin door. Her children watched, silent, proud. Later that day, John gave Sarah a real weapon, a curved steel blade with alien markings on it. She held it like it was sacred. "This belonged to your husband." John shook his head. "No, it belonged to the first man I ever fought. He almost killed me. I kept it to remind myself respect every fight." Sarah gripped the sword tighter. "Then I'll respect this one." That night, something changed. The forest wasn't quiet. It was ... still. Too still, John sat by the fire, checking his rifle. Sarah sat across from him, sharpening the blade. The children were asleep. Then, without warning, a voice came from the shadows outside. "I see you trained her, human." John stood quickly, rifle ready. Sarah rose too, sword in hand. From the trees walked a tall alien warrior, face hidden by a bone mask. His voice was deep and cold. "I am Varen, war cousin of Clan Dre. The widow is mine by right. Her children are property of the clan." Sarah stepped forward, eyes burning. "I belong to no one." Varen tilted his head. "You refuse me, ... for a broken human. You insult our blood." John raised his rifle. "Leave, now." Varen laughed. "You think love will save you? This is not a story. This is war." Sarah didn't flinch. "Then let it be war." Without another word, vanished into the trees. But John knew this wasn't over. He turned to Sarah. "He'll come back, with more." She nodded. "Then I want to. Be ready." The next morning, the children sat with John while Sarah practiced alone. The younger one, Lean, asked softly, "Will you be our dad?" John blinked. "Why?" The boy shrugged. "You protect us." Mommy smiles again. "You talk to the stars like Daddy did." John didn't know what to say. The girl, Mira, added, "She dreams again, too. Last night, she laughed in her sleep." John looked outside. Sarah swung the blade in perfect form now. Not like a beginner, like a warrior. Later that evening, Sarah stepped inside the cabin. She was quiet. Her face was calm, but her eyes were hard. "John, I need to say something." He looked up from cleaning the rifle. "Go ahead." She took a breath. "You can run. You can take the ship and leave tonight. I won't blame you. You've already done more than anyone else. But I won't run anymore." John didn't answer. Sarah stepped closer. "I'll warm your bed, human. Not out of duty. Not out of fear. But because I choose to. I'm not just a mother. I'm not just a widow. I'm a woman who refuses to be broken." John looked at her for a long time. His voice was quiet. "You still want me to teach you?" She smiled softly. "No, I want to fight beside you." That night, John took out an old data chip. It held files from the war battle maps, enemy tactics. Counter-strike plans. He placed it on the table. Then, let's begin. Together, they studied the land, planned the defense, and prepared for what was coming. Outside, thunder-rolled war was near, and for the first time in years, John wasn't alone in the fight. When they came again, the attack came at dawn. The wind carried the smell of smoke before anyone saw fire. John opened his eyes the moment the alarm rang a low, vibrating hum from the motion sensor. He was already dressed. The plasma rifle was in his hands before his feet touched the ground. He didn't wake Sarah. She was already standing in the doorway, sword strapped across her back, eyes staring into the trees. She had smelled it too. They're here. John nodded. Time to move. Outside, the forest glowed red. Fire climbed the trees near the west edge of the clearing. Smoke curled like fingers reaching for the sky. John saw movement, 5 figures walking through the smoke. Shoulder to shoulder, masked and armored. Clan warriors. Varen was with them. Behind them, more shadows moved. 10, maybe more. They didn't come to take Sarah. They came to erase her. Inside the cabin, the children huddled under the floor in the hidden pit John had dug days ago. He handed them each a small cum bead. Stay silent, no matter what you hear. Don't come out, you understand? Lee nodded. Mira whispered, will you come back? John looked her in the eyes. I always come back. He closed the pit door, turned to Sarah. This is it. She tightened her grip on her sword. Then, let's make it count. They didn't wait to be surrounded. They moved first. John fired. From behind the stacked logs near the cabin edge, blue bolts tore through the air, dropping 2 warriors before they could react. Sarah rushed from the side, blade flashing. She was fast. Clean. Sharp. Her movements were no longer wild. She fought like someone with something to protect. The warriors were shocked. They had expected fear. They found fire. Varen stepped forward, pulling a long chain blade from his back. So the widow bites, he said with a cruel grin. And the human teaches her tricks. Let's end this farce. Sarah met his eyes. You don't get to touch my children. You don't get to speak their names. He charged. Their blades clashed in the center of the clearing. Sparks flew. Sarah held her ground, muscles screaming. Arms trembling, but she didn't fall. John fought near the tree line, covering her. He moved like a ghost from the war quick, deadly, unshaken. But they were outnumbered. 2 warriors rushed John from behind. He turned to late. Sarah screamed, John. 1 warrior raised his blade, but Myra appeared from nowhere. A child, a tiny, shaking child holding John's backup blaster. She fired. The bolt hit the warrior's arm, just enough to stop. The strike John turned and dropped them both. Then he stared at the girl. You were supposed to stay hidden. Myra's lips trembled. I couldn't let them take you too, Sarah cried out. Varen's blade slashed across her side. Blood sprayed. She stumbled. John shouted her name and ran forward. Varen lifted his blade to finish her, but Sarah didn't. Fall, she roared. With one last push, she drove her sword forward, right into his chest. The steel pierced his armor. Straight through. Varen gasped, double quotes, you, Sarah stared into his eyes. Not anymore. She pulled the blade free. Varen fell. The rest of the warriors froze. Their leader was dead. John stood beside Sarah, his rifle still raised, blood dripping from his arm. He looked at them, fire in his eyes. Go back. Tell them, she's not alone. One by one, the warriors stepped back, then vanished into the smoke. The forest went quiet again. Sarah dropped to her knees, breathing hard. John caught her before she fell. You're hurt. She nodded. So are you. He looked down at his shoulder. Blood, but nothing fatal. We'll survive. From the broken cabin, the children ran to them. Myra wrapped her arms around John. Lean hugged Sarah. Tightly, no one spoke for a long time. There were no words left. Only breath, only heartbeat, only family. What the children saw morning came slowly. The battle was over, but the wounds remained. The fire had been put out. The bodies were gone. Smoke still lingered in the air like the ghost of a nightmare. John sat on the front steps of the half-broken cabin. His arm was wrapped in a cloth. Blood had dried across his shirt. His face looked calm, but his eyes told another story. Behind him, Sarah lay on a bed made from folded blankets. Her side was stitched, her skin pale. She hadn't spoken since she passed out in his arms. The children were quiet. Too quiet. Lean sat by the window, staring outside, holding the broken toy he never let go of. Myra stood near. John, she hadn't left his side since the fight. Her small hand reached out and touched his knee. Will she wake up? She asked in a whisper. John didn't lie. I hope so. Myra nodded and sat down beside him. They watched the trees together. A few hours passed. John cleaned the wounds again. He checked the weapons. He repaired what he could. But inside, he was breaking. The silence was too loud. The air too heavy. Memories too sharp. He saw her blade in his mind. Slicing through smoke, he heard her scream when Varan struck her. He remembered how her body went limp. Just after the fight ended, he had promised to protect her, and she had almost died. Anyway, then something happened. Sarah stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. She looked around, slowly, then winced. John, he rushed to her side, kneeling down. I'm here. Her voice was weak. Are the children? Safe. They're safe. You saved them. Tears filled her eyes. I didn't want them to see that. John touched her hand gently. They didn't see a mother fall. They saw a warrior rise. Later. That day, the children came into the room. Myra carried a cup of water. Lean held a flower he had picked, blue and strange-looking, but beautiful in its own way. They stood beside her quietly. Sarah smiled through her pain. I'm sorry you had to see that. Lean shook his head. I saw you fight for us, like Daddy used to talk about. I wasn't scared. Myra looked at John. You were hurt too. But you didn't run. Sarah reached for both of them. You were brave too. You listened, you helped, you saved us. The children leaned into her arms, and for the first time in a long while, they felt safe. That night, the stars were clear. John sat outside again, cleaning the sword Sarah had used to kill. VARR on. It wasn't just a weapon anymore. It was part of her story now, part of all of theirs. Sarah stepped outside slowly, wrapped in a thick blanket. She sat beside him. They didn't speak for a while then. She said, I thought I'd die that day. John looked at the blade. So did I. She smiled faintly. You didn't run. He shook his head. I don't run anymore. She placed her hand over his. They saw you stand between us and death. You're already more of a father than most. John didn't answer right away, but his heart heard every word. Later that night, as Sarah slept again, John heard soft footsteps. It was Myra. She held her broken toy in one hand and a small blanket in the other. Can I sit with you? He nodded. She sat beside him and looked at the stars. My real daddy used to tell me stories about the sky, about lights that talk to each other. Is that true? John smiled slightly. Maybe. Some say the stars carry messages. Some say they carry dreams. Myra looked up. Do you think the stars saw us? Saw what we did? John looked at her. I think the stars see everything. But more than that, I think they remember. Mira leaned against his arm. Then, I hope, they remember. Mommy winning. John looked at the stars above, burning bright, silent and endless, and he whispered to them, she did. The father they chose, week passed. The forest healed faster than the people. The smoke was gone, but the ground still wore the scars of battle. Burnt trees, broken branches, blackened soil. John's cabin was half destroyed, but still standing. Inside, something else was growing, a family. Sarah could walk again. Her wound was healing, but she still moved with care. She laughed more now. Not the loud kind, but the soft kind that comes from peace after pain. The children had changed too. They were no longer hiding. They ran through the yard. They practiced sword swings with sticks. They helped John repair the roof. They started calling him something new, Dad. At first, they whispered it, then said it loud, and then he answered. One morning, John sat outside with Lean on his lap, showing him how to clean a blaster safely. Mira was in Sarah's arms, drawing with a burnt stick on a wooden board. Then a sound came from the trees. A group approached, slowly, clan members. But unarmed, not warriors, elders, mothers. Two old men with their hands raised. John stood fast, hand on his rifle. Sarah stepped beside him, still limping but proud. One of the elders bowed. We heard what happened. We saw Varen's body. The others who returned told us how she fought, how the humans stood beside her. John didn't speak. Sarah narrowed her eyes. You came to finish what he started. The elder shook his head. No, we came to apologize. Another elder stepped forward. For too long, we followed old laws, laws that punished love, that hated mixed blood, that feared strength in strange places. He looked at the children. Your children are not cursed. They are the future. Sarah's lips tightened. And what do you want now? The first elder looked at John. We want peace. We want to offer your family a new home, one with walls, with safety, with honor. John looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at the children. Then, she turned back. No. The elders flinched. She stepped forward. We already have a home. It may be small, it may be broken, but here, my children are free. They are loved. They are taught by a man who never raised his voice, never struck them, never ran from danger. Her voice grew stronger. You call us a family now. But we were. A family before you said it. We don't need your permission. John stood behind her, silent but powerful. The elders nodded slowly. Then we will protect this land from afar. And we will tell the clans what happened here. Let your name be remembered, Sarah, and yours too, John of Earth. They bowed and left. That evening, Sarah stood at the edge of the forest with John. The sun was low. The sky orange and soft. She looked at him. You didn't have to stay. You could have left when I knocked on your door, but you didn't. John looked at her, his voice quiet. I was broken when you found me, hiding from everything. But you gave me a reason to fight again. She took his hand. You gave us a reason to hope again. They stood in silence. Then Sarah said something simple, something honest. Will you stay? Not just as a soldier, not just as a protector, but as part of us. John didn't answer with words. He knelt down on one knee, arms open. Lean and Mira ran into him. Laughing, Sarah stepped forward and knelt beside him. The four of them held each other as the stars blinked awake above them. That night, John looked up at the sky. He remembered Earth. He remembered the war, the people he'd lost, the guilt he'd carried. But now, here, under this sky, with these people, he wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a father, by choice, not by blood, not by duty, but by love.